Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're tackling a really significant time in history, the impact of British rule on India.
Absolutely. A complex and hugely influential period.
So our goal today is, to unpack the key effects of this era, what really changed, what mattered.
And why it still resonates today. It's crucial history.
Definitely. Okay, so let's maybe start by laying some groundwork. There are some key terms in this material we should probably define first.
Good idea. Understanding the language used is key.
First one that jumps out is jewel in the crown. Sounds quite grand.
It does, doesn't it? But it wasn't just a nice nickname.
Right. The material suggests it was more practical.
Exactly. It was the British term for India, signifying its immense economic value. Strategic value, too.
So, like, the most prized possession in the British Empire.
Pretty much, yeah. The resources, wealth, manpower. India provided a massive amount to Britain. It wasn't really a term of endearment, more like an assessment of value.
Gotcha. And a lot of this value, initially at least, was extracted by the East India Company. That's our next term.
That's right. The East India Company, or IIC,
Yeah.
it wasn't the British government itself, not at first.
It's not just business, yeah. A trading company.
Precisely. Formed way back in 1600 purely for trade with the East Indies and then India. Spices, textiles, that sort of thing.
But it became much more than just a trading company.
Oh, absolutely. Its power grew incredibly over the centuries. It ended up, governing large parts of India.
Governing, like actually running the place.
Yes. Collecting taxes, making laws.
Mm-hmm.
It even had its own massive private army.
A company with an army? That's wild.
It controlled huge amounts of trade, too. The
Huh.
curriculum mentioned spices, cotton, sugar, silk, tea, and opium, importantly.
Right.
By the 1700s, some say it controlled maybe half of all world trade. That gives you a sense of its scale and power.
Half the world's trade. Incredible. Okay, so this powerful company is essentially in charge, but then things start to go wrong, leading to the Sepoy Mutiny in 1857.
A major turning point.
Who exactly were the Sepoys, and what led to the mutiny? The sources mention growing resentment.
The Sepoys were Indian soldiers who served in the East India Company's army, a huge part of its military strength, actually.
Okay.
But their anger had been building. The material points to several things. Disrespect for their religious customs, both Hindu and Muslim.
That seems like a big mistake.
A huge mistake. Plus, widespread racist treatment by British officers. They were often seen as inferior.
And practical things, too, like pay.
Definitely. Lower pay than British soldiers doing the same job. Very few opportunities for promotion. It created this pressure cooker environment.
Makes sense. So the mutiny itself, it was a rebellion against the company.
Yes, a large-scale rebellion against the EIC's rule. It spread across large parts of northern and central India.
Was it successful?
Ultimately, no. The British, with considerable effort and brutality, suppressed it. But it had massive consequences.
Which leads us to the next term, the Raj, starring right after the mutiny, 1858.
Exactly. The mutiny was a huge shock to the British system. They realized a private company couldn't handle ruling India, especially after such a massive revolt.
So the government stepped in.
Yes. The British Crown, the government itself, took direct control from the East India Company. That period, from 1858 until independence in 1947, is known as the British Raj.
And what changed under the Raj? Was it just a different boss?
It meant tighter, more direct control, enforcement of British laws, British administration systems, and a stronger push to introduce British culture.
Which sometimes meant suppressing Indian culture.
Often, yes. There was a definite sense of imposing British ways, sometimes subtly, sometimes quite overtly.
Okay, so direct British rule. Now, the curriculum also talks about agriculture changing, this idea of cash crops. What are those?
A cash crop is pretty simple, really. It's a crop grown specifically to be sold on the market for profit, not primarily for the farmer to eat.
Like cotton or tea.
Exactly. Cotton for British textile mills, indigo for dyes, tea for British consumers. These became major focuses.
How did British rule influence this?
Well, the British administration actively encouraged and sometimes forced Indian farmers to switch from growing food crops like rice or wheat to growing these cash crops for export.
Why? Just for the money?
Largely, yes, to supply Britain's industries and markets. But the impact on India was, well, it could be devastating.
How so?
Because less land was available for growing food for the local population. This shift contributed significantly to major famines.
Famines. Wow. So people were starving while crops were being exported.
Tragically, yes, that happened multiple times. Food security for Indians became a serious problem under this system.
That's a really dark side to it. Okay, moving to social structure. The caste system comes up. Can you explain that briefly and how the British interacted with it?
Sure. The caste system is a very old and complex social hierarchy in India, traditionally dividing society into groups based on birth, occupation, etc.
And the British, did they try to change it?
Not really. In fact, the sources suggest they often exploited it. They used the existing divisions to help maintain control.
Oh.
By sometimes giving privileges or positions to certain castes, they could play groups off against each other, making it harder for Indians to unite against British rule. It was a kind of divide and rule strategy.
That sounds manipulative.
It was certainly a way to consolidate power using the existing social fabric.
Okay. Another term here is civil service. We use that term today, but what did it mean in British India?
The civil service is basically the bureaucracy, the government workers who run the administration.
Right.
Under the Raj, Indians were eventually allowed to enter the civil service. But, and this is a big but,
The top jobs went to the British.
overwhelmingly yes. The key policy-making roles, the positions of real power, were reserved for British officials. Indian civil servants face a lot of discrimination, a glass ceiling.
So even if they were in the government, they didn't really have the power.
Exactly. And this lack of real opportunity and respect was another major factor fueling the desire for self-rule for independence.
Makes sense. Now, a slightly different kind of term, thugs. We use that word today, but what's the historical context here?
Yeah, the word thug has its origins in India. Historically, it referred to organized groups, gangs really, who were known for robbery and reportedly ritualistic murder, sometimes in the name of the goddess Kali. This was called thuggee.
Okay, so actual criminal gangs.
Yes, but the British response is interesting. They launched a major campaign to suppress thuggee in the 19th century.
Which sounds like a good thing, right? Stopping criminals.
On the surface, yes. But the British also used their campaign against thuggee as a justification for their rule.
What do you mean?
They presented themselves as bringing law, order, and morality to a supposedly chaotic India. Suppressing thuggee became part of their narrative about why British control was necessary and beneficial, a sort of moral high ground claim.
Right, another way to legitimize their presence. Okay, last specific term, suti, or sometimes sati. What was this?
Suti or sati was a practice primarily among some Hindu communities where a widow would voluntarily or sometimes under pressure immolate herself on her husband's funeral pyre.
Oh, wow. That's intense.
Extremely. It was seen by the British as barbaric and inhumane. They officially outlawed it in 1829.
Which seems like a positive step, protecting women.
And many Indians, especially social reformers, agreed and supported the ban. However,
There's always a however.
right. For others, it was seen as the British interfering deeply in Indian religious customs and traditions. So even actions that the British presented as purely moral or reformist could still cause resentment and be seen as cultural imposition.
It's really complex, isn't it? Even seemingly positive actions could have negative interpretations in that context.
Absolutely. Nothing was simple.
So if we step back and try to, summarize all this, British rule clearly had a massive, multifaceted effect on India.
Huge. Economically, socially, politically, culturally, it touched everything.
The economic drive seems central. The East India Company, the jewel in the crown idea, cash crops. It was all about extracting wealth and resources.
That was definitely a primary motivator, yes. And it fundamentally reshaped India's economy, often, as we saw with the famines, at great cost to the Indian people themselves.
And socially, too. Interfering with practices like suti, but also using things like the caste system. It really changed the social landscape.
It did. They weren't just passive rulers, they actively intervened, sometimes claiming moral superiority, while also using existing structures for their own benefit. And resistance grew. The Sepoy Mutiny is the most dramatic example of that pushback.
Yeah, that really stands out as a moment where things shifted.
Definitely. It led directly to the Raj, to direct government control. And while that meant more entrenched British power, it also, perhaps paradoxically, solidified and fueled the movement for Indian independence.
Because people were reacting against that direct control.
Exactly. The shared experience of being ruled directly by a foreign power, the discrimination of the civil service, the economic policies, it all contributed to a growing sense of Indian nationalism and the desire for self-governance.
So even though British rule ended back in 1947, the legacy, it's still very present in India today, isn't it?
Without a doubt. The economic structures, the political boundaries, social dynamics, even the administrative systems. Many things in modern India have roots tracing back to this period. You can't really understand India today without understanding the impact of British rule.
This has been really illuminating. Taking these concepts one by one helps build a clearer picture.
Hopefully, yeah. It's a lot to take in.
It is. So to help everyone listening kind of consolidate this, maybe some self-assessment questions would be useful.
Good idea. Helps to process the information.
Yeah.
Okay, first one. What were the main economic reasons Britain was interested in India? Can you give maybe 2 examples from what we discussed?
Right. Second, how did the British impact Indian society and culture? Think about both their direct actions and how they used existing things like the caste system.
Mm-hmm. Third, why was the Sepoy Mutiny such a crucial turning point? What really changed in how India was ruled after that event?
Good one. And finally, try to explain, just in your own words, why India was called the jewel in the crown. What does that nickname tell us about the whole relationship between Britain and India back then?
Thinking through those should really help lock in the key takeaways from this deep dive.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into a really important and complex piece of history.
My pleasure. Always important to understand these historical forces. Until next time, keep digging deeper.